I'm the Gray Man, and one last time, play the song.
In December of 2020, Drew Taylor of Collider.com broke the news that Disney would not be renewing DuckTales after the completion of its third season, which was very rude of him instead of letting the creators make that announcement. Thanks, jerk. A day later, showrunners Matt Youngberg and Frank Angones released an official statement confirming the worst. Season 3 would indeed be the end of the show. But the good news is that even though it was the end, the moment had been prepared for. This wasn't some premature cancellation that came out of nowhere. The cast and crew went into this knowing that it would be the end, so they decided to do what they've always done. Give it their all. And man, did their effort pay off, because Season 3 has got to be the most consistently good season DuckTales has given us. I could have easily made a list of honorable mentions that equaled this top 10 list. If the show was going out, it was going out on top.
For those of you just tuning in, here's the story so far.
Scrooge and the rest of the Duck family stumble on an old diary that belonged to Isabella Finch, a famous adventurer Scrooge himself admired when he was a kid. Inside, they find entries on the most famous treasures Finch never managed to find. So Scrooge decides to literally follow in her footsteps and collect them all. But as established in last season's finale, Scrooge's business has been infiltrated by Fowl, the fiendish organization for world larceny, being run by none other than his CFO, Bradford Buzzard, who's ready to make a move not just on the treasures, but finally putting an end to the Duck family so they can take over the world. Ground rules for this list are the same as my previous ones. First off, there will be spoilers. Second off, I will not be including the finale, since that depends on payoffs from all these other episodes, and that would just be unfair. In fact, the finale is the one episode that I'm not gonna spoil, since so much stuff goes down. For now, let me just sum it up like this.
What? No, that's impossible, unless... Oh my gosh, no, wait. It couldn't. Could it?
Every episode will be judged by the same criteria I've used up until now. The antagonist and/or conflict, how they overcome it, the expansion of the lore and/or characters, the production design and animation quality, and most importantly, how fun the episode is.
But really, this is such a story-heavy season that expansion of the lore is going to be the big deciding factor going forward. Sorry, everyone. The video's over 45 minutes. I had to narrow this down somehow.
Number 10. Challenge of the Senior Junior Woodchucks. Huey finally has an opportunity to be a senior junior woodchuck like he's always wanted, but discovers to his horror that Violet is his competition this year. Both have to brave a grueling trial as they ascend a mountain using all of the junior woodchuck skills they've accumulated and prove who deserves to go home with the title. While that's going on, Scrooge discovers a treasure map left behind by adventurer Isabella Finch and tries to keep his eye on the prize while keeping his family from getting too distracted by a colorful dancing bird. Wait, what?
Oi, do you mind? I'm speechifying!
Wait, so you have a show starring walking, talking birds, and yet you still have regular birds interacting with the walking, talking birds? How does this work?
Since my big thing is advancement of the lore, I find it best to include the episode where the season arc starts. Season 1 was all about Dewey's character development, and Season 2 was all about Louie's. Here, it's Huey, who finally gets his time in the spotlight. Being a dedicated junior woodchuck has been a big part of his character ever since the reboot began, so that's nothing new. But really, this is about how Huey functions when all of his usual support structures are taken away and he has to think on the fly. The result? He, could use some improvement.
No guidebook, no map, no clue, no guidebook, no hopes, no chance, no guidebook!
Some fans have said that the reboot's portrayal of Huey presents him as somewhat on the autism spectrum given his rigid belief in structure and routine, and perhaps it's no coincidence that Danny Pudi was cast to play him, since he has experience playing an autistic character on Community.
Larry, I'm on DuckTales.
Now, I know talking about the autism spectrum can be a bit of a sensitive topic, especially right now. Yeesh. But as someone who coincidentally happens to be on the autism spectrum, I personally don't mind making some quick observations.
It's called hyperlexia, folks. If you learned how to read at a really young age, it might be worth a Google.
On the surface, yes, Huey does come off like he's on the autism spectrum. So does Violet, actually. In fact, they each represent different aspects of autistic traits. Huey learns best by structure and repetition, while Violet learns best by copying an example and applying a logical outlook.
If you are as prepared as a helpless baby, then I will beat you easily. Apologies. Lena told me that friendly smack talk is expected in competitions such as these.
But that's a surface level reading. The truth is that while there's a certain shared experience when it comes to the autism spectrum, there isn't really a universal experience. Everyone's story is going to be different. There is one aspect of Huey's character that I relate to, though, personally, and that's crippling anxiety!
Huey's greatest flaw is that he spends so much time obsessing over making the right decision that he finds himself completely overwhelmed when he has to think on his feet, to the point of having to use specific mental techniques to stay centered. One of the funnier developments in this episode is JW, the talking guidebook Huey imagines that's voiced by Stephen Root.
I'll just go to the guidebook in my mind. Manic episodes, mass hallucinations, mental breakdowns, moss...
I reckon you're searching for navigational techniques.
This is new.
Ugh, he's got a mind palace. This is Sherlock all over again.
Actually, rewatching this episode, it's interesting to see how Huey's storyline ties in with Scrooge's, because in the end, they both have the same problem. Huey keeps doing things by the book, even when that doesn't work out. Scrooge, meanwhile, wants to follow Isabella Finch's map to the letter, denying himself the possible new adventure the singing bird seems to be leading them on. In the end, they both learn something new. Huey learns that failure isn't the end of the world, and Scrooge learns that he can still discover new things he hadn't considered possible before.
But it's history, so let's rewrite history.
Number 9, Quack Pack. While trying to reclaim some treasure from some giant scorpions, it happens, Donald says out loud that he wishes everyone had normal family problems instead of weird adventures like this. And he just so happened to make that wish while sitting on top of a lamp, which just so happens to have a magical genie inside that traps everyone in a cheesy sitcom version of their lives. Oh, and he also grants Donald his Don Cheadle voice again.
Uncle Donald, does something feel, I don't know, off?
Well, everything seems perfectly normal to me.
Everybody is horrified and wants to leave, but Donald wants to stay because at least the family is finally safe. Either way, he'll have to make a decision soon before the family is consumed by the most horrifying monster of all. From a production standpoint, the animation isn't very flashy in this episode, but that's because it's mimicking the static shots and sets of a 3-camera family sitcom. The lame one-liners, the wacky situations, the scene transitions, the commercials. Stylistically, this episode has the sitcom format down.
Ah! We're trapped! How are we supposed to get out of here? How does anything happen on a TV show?
We need some wacky hijinks.
On it!
How did I get here? Why am I dancing?
In fact, that's one of the things that makes this episode so creepy, because let's be honest, sitcoms are creepy. The biggest show on Disney Plus right now is about how creepy sitcoms are, and why not enhance it by getting an actual sitcom star?
Okay, you got me. Shall we? The name's Gene!
Old school DuckTale fans are probably familiar with Gene the Genie because of the movie, The Treasure of the Lost Lamp. In that film, the character was voiced by Rip Taylor and was played as more of a nervous wreck because of all the terrible wishes he had been forced to grant in the past.
Big wishes always spell big trouble. And before you know it, they'll all be fighting over me, and the wishes will get out of control, and I'll end up being buried in the lamp for another 1,000 years.
Here, though, the character is very different, played as more out of touch because he's been stuck in the lamp since 1990, which was the year the DuckTales movie originally came out. You even see him playing with Pogs in one scene. And he's voiced by none other than Urkel himself, Jaleel White. And while Urkel might be his best known role, Jaleel has gotten regular work as a voice actor as far back as the 90s, when he voiced Sonic the Hedgehog. So he's able to match the energy and pace of DuckTales extremely well.
How long will we be stuck in here?
Well, next week Launchpad has 3 dates on the same night. Then Louie loses his pet snake in a house. Probably at least 3 seasons, plus spin-offs, and I assume they'll reboot the show eventually.
But we don't remember this episode for Jaleel White, or Don Cheadle for that matter. We remember a very different guest star.
Hiya, neighbor!
And wouldn't you know it, Goofy ends up teaching Donald the lesson he needs in order to undo the wish. Part of why sitcom reality is so freaky is because it reduces every character on the show to a one-note joke that they bash endlessly into the viewer's brain. Scrooge is cheap, Della's been to the moon, Louie is the schemer, etc., etc. And yes, those are big aspects of their personalities, but it's not all there is to them. Every DuckTales character up until now has shown how much dimension they have, how they can be angry, sad, smart, stupid, and yes, even funny. To reduce them in such a way would be the real tragedy, and nobody's better equipped to teach that lesson than Goofy. It'd have been easy just to have Goofy show up, trip over some stuff, do something stupid, and then leave. Instead, we get to see the dimension Goofy has when talking about his unique experiences with his own family and how that made them into who they are. And yet, even with all of that character depth, at no point does the episode feel overstuffed or bogged down. Now that Della is a main member of the cast, we're sitting pretty at 9 main characters. Goofy makes it an even 10, yet everybody everybody in this episode gets to do something memorable or funny. In fact, my favorite part of the episode is when Beakley, Della, and Webby jump in to save Launchpad from his prospective dates. A lot of weaker shows would have written any one of these characters as just the girl, but this scene shows how distinct they are and what they bring to the table irrespective of their gender. So long as it still involves a lot of fighting.
See here, young lady. Take that personal trip yourself. Discover who you are on your own.
Have some self-respect. You can find a better study partner than Launchpad! No offense, LP.
Ah, speaking of whom. Number 8, 00 Duck, in You Only Quack Twice. Dewey has spent all of his allowance trying to win a new virtual spy game at Funzo's Fun Zone, but keeps getting hampered because he brought Launchpad along, who keeps on, well, being Launchpad.
Can I help you?
Ham and cheese. No, pepperoni. No, oh gosh, no, now I'm hungry. Ketchup? Or no, Thousand Island? I can't remember when I'm hungry.
More importantly, it turns out Funzo's is a secret base for Fowl, and Bradford isn't happy that Scrooge McDuck and the kids are lurking around so close to their hiding place. Armed with a new IntelliRay that makes people smarter or dumber depending on the setting, Black Heron and her henchman Steelbeak make their move to get the Duck family off their turf without giving away their position. I initially didn't know what to think of this episode, but after a few viewings, I grew to appreciate the showcase that this episode gave for Launchpad, which is helped by giving him a rival in the form of Steelbeak. This version of the character may take older Disney Afternoon fans by surprise, since he's very different from the original Rob Paulson version that appeared on Darkwing Duck. That Steelbeak was very suave and sarcastic, but also very deadly, easily one of Darkwing's toughest foes.
So I says to myself, hey, what kind of an adventure is it if we don't invite the comedy relief? How you doing, Dax?
This version, voiced by Jason Mantzoukas, is more of a schoolyard bully who's written as so stupid you actually have difficulty following his train of thought at times.
Of course! With this, we can make Scrooge so hungry, he'll eat all the world's toys!
What?
But while he may be less clever and conniving than the original, that doesn't make him any less dangerous. As I said about Glomgold in my last video, villains don't necessarily have to be smart. Their goal of ruining the heroes' lives is more than enough. Launchpad may be a bit dim, but he's so good-natured you kinda love him regardless. Steelbeak just wants to dominate and inflict pain, even on his own co-workers. It's very telling that when Steelbeak finally gets his hands on the IntelliRay, his first instinct isn't to make himself smarter, but to make Black Heron dumber. He's the worst kind of stupid, the kind that thinks everyone else is stupid. Speaking of which, I felt very protective of Launchpad as this series has gone on. It's very easy to write stupid characters poorly, and there's been many occasions where the writers have overshot it, to the point where he can't even distinguish fiction from reality at times. Once Launchpad gets hit by the IntelliRay though, that all goes out the window. Not only does he become a more competent hero, but we also get a taste of the insecurity he lives with on a regular basis. It's tragic to know that Launchpad is fully aware he's not as smart as the rest of the Duck family, but it's comforting to know that they love him all the same.
But I can't sacrifice my intelligence. There's so much more I could accomplish. Stop the evil conspiracy out to get us. Solve world hunger. Land a plane. There must be some other way.
And we get another Disney Afternoon cameo in the form of the Rescue Rangers, and it's kind of a miracle that they even appeared at all. You see, when the producers got started on this reboot of DuckTales, they had the rights to every Disney Afternoon cast except the Rescue Rangers, because a movie starring them had long been in development, and Disney didn't want any conflicts with the brand. So what to do? Put them in anyway. The writers snuck them in by only referring to them as intelligent rodents in the script. They didn't have any lines, at least not ones we could understand, and are never explicitly referred to as the Rescue Rangers, aside from one brief reference at the end.
Thanks for the rescue.
By the time Disney Brass found out what the team was up to, the episode was too far along into production to scrap it, but they felt the references were harmless and let it air as is.
So let that be a lesson, folks. If your bosses tell you not to do something, go ahead and do it anyway. I'm sure it'll work out fine.
Number 7. Louie's 11. Huh, I didn't actually intend that. The three Caballeros aren't having any luck getting attention for their music, so Louie suggests crashing an event hosted by renowned tastemaker Emma Glamour in the hopes of getting on her famous It List. The problem is that the It List is so exclusive, almost nobody can get on it, much less the big party she's hosting at the Duckburg Museum. Undeterred, Louie calls in every favor he can, putting together a dream team of cast members in hopes of getting the band in and getting them noticed. So in short, it's a heist.
You son of a bitch, I'm in.
Unlike my other choices for this list, this episode doesn't so much advance the lore as much as it uses all of the lore that we've gotten up until now. This is a big showcase for the supporting cast of DuckTales, which has gotten so big and expansive by this point that we don't even question it when the members of Louie's team make their entrances. The three Caballeros, Gyro, Falcon Graves, Gabby McStaverson, it's like one big ol' supporting cast free-for-all. But even so, we still get a fairly big addition to the cast by finally introducing Daisy Duck. And for as many new twists on old characters this version of DuckTales has given us, Daisy is one of the few things that's been changed the least. She's even still voiced by Tress MacNeille, who's been her official voice actress since 1999. Still, this gives us the rare opportunity to see Donald and Daisy's romance from the very beginning, which I don't think I've seen in any other Disney adaptation. But it serves as a sweet reminder what these two characters have in common. They're both very assertive, they both feel ignored and misunderstood, and they're not above kicking a little ass when the occasion calls for it. And considering how tempestuous their relationship can be in other versions, it's nice to see this version of Donald in particular be a charming, supportive boyfriend. I mean, come on, he's taking care of his kids, he's going to therapy, he's working on himself. I want this version of Donald to be happy.
Nobody listens to me either. They don't understand me.
Well, that's weird. I understand you perfectly.
The only downside of this episode is that the ultimate villain is revealed to be Mark Zuckerberg, who has thoroughly worn out his welcome by this point.
Oh, that reminds me, I need to address something. In my previous two DuckTales videos, I technically made the same observation twice.
I confess the new Gizmo Duck episodes have left me a bit underwhelmed, but of the two Spotlight stories we've gotten so far, this one is easily the best. And after a season of just being another douchey tech bro, it's nice to see Mark Zuckerberg here finally be a threatening villain. I'm still kind of neutral on the Gizmo Duck episodes, but this was probably the best one to date, and we finally get to see Mark Zuckerberg be a threatening villain.
Yeah, if I felt inclined to be impressed that a villain was actually threatening for once, that means they're not very threatening in general now, are they?
Mark Zuckerberg sucks. He only has one other villain feature this season, and it's about how much he sucks.
Yes, why are you still a thing?
Excuse you?
It's very, very sad.
You said it, buddy. Number 6, ASTRO B.O.Y.D. So hey, remember B.O.Y.D, that adorable little robot boy that Mark Zuckerberg brought to a birthday party last season? Long story.
Does not compute! Compute! No, I am not a computer!
Turns out he didn't build him, because of course he didn't. Turns out B.O.Y.D is really Tubio, a project that Gyro abandoned after his former mentor, Dr. Akira, secretly reprogrammed him for evil. Gyro just wants to shut him down and be done with it, but Huey insists B.O.Y.D deserves better than that. So the three of them, plus Fenton, head off for Tokyo to find the answers they need and put the past to rest once and for all. Since the inspiration for DuckTales originally came from comics, it's only fitting that the show do an episode-long tribute to Japanese manga, specifically the god of manga himself, Osamu Tezuka. Because they both became famous around the same time, there was a lot of professional respect between Tezuka and Walt Disney, and their works frequently took cues from one another. Perhaps a little too much. But this episode is no ripoff of Tezuka. Rather, it's a tribute, specifically his most famous creation, Astro Boy. Aside from having a similar origin and skill set, B.O.Y.D's designation, Tubio, is even a reference to Tobio, Astro Boy's original name. The inspector who hassles Gyro is even explicitly named Tezuka, though they're not based off an Astro Boy character. Rather, they're based off of one of the most famous anime characters of all time, Inspector Zenigata from Lupin III. You can even see Lupin himself running around in the background in a couple of scenes. Speaking of robots, this episode made me realize why I was so meh about the Gizmo Duck episodes before this one. They all basically had the same plot. Fenton has to learn some new thing about how to be Gizmo Duck, and Mark Zuckerberg tries to steal the armor again, and Fenton has to stop him. Rinse, repeat. In this episode, Fenton isn't bound by that worn-out formula, which allows him to just be a normal participant in the story. And he also finally goes up against a worthy opponent when he fights B.O.Y.D during the climax, allowing him to finally unleash the full might of the Gizmo Duck armor. Look at this animation! The production team really outdid themselves on this one, and not just with the fight scenes. Tokyo has to be one of the most fleshed out environments we've seen, with rich colors, architecture, and background extras unique to this one episode. They even got the tourists down! Friggin' weeaboos. However, the main character arc of this story doesn't belong to B.O.Y.D, Fenton, or even Huey. It belongs to Gyro, who hasn't really gotten the spotlight up until now. At his worst, this version of Gyro has been rather cynical, with fans saying he's too different from how he was in the original show. Well, turns out Gyro actually did used to be very similar to his original counterpart, but being betrayed by his mentor served as the catalyst for his bitterness and cynicism. Realizing that he wasn't at fault, though, returns enough of his good nature to calm down B.O.Y.D at last, as well as finally give Fenton the due credit he deserves.
So,
You're hired full-time, Dr. Crackshell Gerbera.
That's not technically how doctorates work, and I don't care.
So why didn't this episode make the top 5? Well, if I'm being honest, I think Dr. Akita is kind of a weak villain. That's not due to his betrayal, however. Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa has been playing villains like this for decades, so anything funny or memorable definitely comes from him.
Tubio is within range. Luke.
No, the problem is with the writing. Dr. Akita is so one-dimensionally evil that you can't help but wonder how Gyro never caught on to the fact that he was a bad guy until it was too late. And the rest of the time, he's just subject to played-out hikikomori jokes. And let me tell you, after a year in quarantine, I have a whole new view on being a reclusive shut-in.
Buddy, stay inside and eat all the shrimp chips you want. You might just save some lives.
Number 5, The Phantom and the Sorceress. Lena's magic still isn't working the way it should, and that becomes a big problem when we meet a new villain whose whole thing is destroying magic. Turns out Lena is being hunted by the Phantom Blot, a foul agent who has an old grudge against Magica De Spell after she destroyed his village a long time ago. After that, he dedicated himself to eliminating magic from the world completely, perfecting a special gauntlet that can suck the power out of any magical being. After getting cut off from Scrooge and the boys, Lena, Webby, and Violet realize they need to consult an expert, who, unfortunately, happens to be Magica.
Lena! Give me the amulet!
So in order to deal with a grave new threat, Lena has to get advice from her worst enemy.
Phantom Blot is after me because he thinks I'm you. Her magic isn't a legacy, it's a curse.
Sure, blame the witch. How original.
First off, let's talk about the Phantom Blot. The creators have assembled a great cast of villains to make up Fowl, both old and new. But no Disney villain is older than the Phantom Blot, who debuted in the classic Mickey Mouse comics way back in 1939. This Phantom Blot maintains the ruthlessness of old versions, but cuts right to the point when it comes to his tactics. This Blot is lean and mean, but would arguably be considered the hero if not for the fact that he doesn't care who he hurts in his quest to eliminate magic. Also, he's played by Giancarlo Esposito, because aren't all villains these days?
I ain't even mad. Get that money, son.
But concerning Lena. In my first video, I praised how DuckTales wasn't afraid to ruthlessly portray abusive family dynamics through the story between Magica and Lena. In Season 2, we saw Magica finally banished from Lena's life, and see her move on from that abuse.
So what about Season 3? Well, how do I put this? In Season 3, Lena goes to therapy.
Lena dealt with that abuse and escaped that abuse, but now she has to reconcile with that abuse. She didn't sign on to be Magica's niece or inherit her powers, but regardless, she did, and now she has to confront it before moving on with the rest of her life. And like most abusers, Magica insists that anything good Lena possesses came from her, but that's just not true, as we see with Lena's new distinct magic aura at the end of the episode.
Hey, why is the color of my magic blue sometimes?
It's the color of your personal magic signature. All sorcerers have one. Mine is a vastly superior malevolent purple. Here, I'll prove it. Give me the amulet.
You are exhausting, you know that?
Lena has her own magic now, and it's built on the love and support that she gets from her new family and friends. In fact, I found it very refreshing that at no point do Webby and Violet trust Magica. There's never a moment where they give her the benefit of the doubt, because she has not even come close to earning it. They're here for Lena's sake. No more, no less. Also, we get to see Gladstone suffer for most of the runtime, and that's a lot of fun. You can abuse that guy all you want, I don't give a shit.
Ow! Why?
Oh man, I can watch this all day.
No! No! Anything but this!
I'm gonna leave this running. Does anyone else want a shrimp chip?
Number 4, The Split Sword of Swanstantine. Yeah, kind of a dark horse pick, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Scrooge has tracked down another relic from Finch's journal, the Split Sword of Swanstantine, to the marketplace of Istanbul, where Fowl is lying in wait to get the drop on them. Fortunately, Scrooge has brought along Huey, Dewey, Louie, Webby, and... Wait, why are Lena and Violet here?
We were sleeping over and you said, everyone in the plane. So we got in the plane.
Okay. With not a lot of time on their hands and enemies on all sides, the team splits up to find the 3 pieces of the sword and hold off the Fowl agents for as long as they can. Dewey and Webby take on Gandra D, Louie and Violet take on John Rockerduck, and Huey and Lena take on Steelbeak. I wanted to highlight this episode because it has a unique format unlike any other in the show's run. From the minute the kids split up, all the stories more or less play out in real time, meaning we have a DuckTales episode that can literally be told in 21 minutes plus commercials. And this episode also gives us unique character combinations we haven't seen up until now. Dewey and Webby have had plenty of scenes together, yes, but their segment still shows their differences despite their close friendship. Webby plans just enough. Dewey just does it. Your mileage may vary on which is better.
Whoa! Dewey! It's okay, I can't see the danger. Whoa! My vision is coming back. I'm gonna die!
Oh, maybe I can echolocate using sound waves like a bat! Scream! Scream!
Then we have Louie and Violet's segment, where they try to reclaim their part of the sword from Istanburg's criminal underground and get forced into a spice duel with Rocker Duck.
Also, my mouth is on fire. Excuse me.
I'll come back to Louie and Violet in a second, but first let's talk about Huey and Lena reclaiming their part of the sword from Steelbeak. Lena uses her magic to freeze time until she and Huey can think of a way to defeat him. Huey plays out dozens of scenarios, but none of them succeed because Steelbeak is just that much stronger. Lena stumbles on a possible way though, and it involves prying into the deepest, darkest parts of Huey's subconscious.
No, don't open it!
Once again, Huey is overthinking everything, including how to respond to random physical violence. Most reasonable people don't like to get violent because it takes them to a place they'd rather not go to, embracing that dark part of yourself that you don't like. But you know who else has faced the darkness and come out stronger?
Take it from someone who used to be Magicka's shadow. You can't ignore the parts of yourself you don't like, even the parts you're afraid of. You gotta own them.
But I think the most impressive part of this episode is that the kids really do wrap it up so quickly. It's a testament to how everyone has grown and what experienced adventurers they become over the last 3 seasons. Getting back to Louie and Violet, they're eventually backed into her corner after they spend all of their time lying about their reputations in order to impress the other criminals. But then they realize something. They don't need to lie. They've accomplished plenty of fantastic feats all on their own.
Wait, you're the Louie Duck?
The very Louie Duck who vanquished the Bombi, overthrew the Pharaoh Tothra, and crushed Scrooge McDuck's greatest enemies with a single pen stroke!
Now you see why we go by fake names?
Because the truth of us is far more terrifying.
So, yeah, I'm happy to put this episode in the top 5. And if you're curious if there's any advancement of the lore, well, trust me. Number 3, The First Adventure. Yeah, without warning and completely out of nowhere, we get a flashback episode for how all of this began, how Fowl was formed, how Scrooge took in Della and Donald, and how Bradford became CFO of McDuck Enterprises. Scrooge has been saddled with his young niece and nephew for the day, who are disappointed that he's left adventuring behind in favor of running his corporation. They're in luck though, because Shush has tracked down the lost pirate ship of Captain Yellowbeak, which contains the Papyrus of Binding, an insanely powerful bit of magical parchment that grants whatever wish you write on it. Scrooge is all business as usual about it, but Della and Donald insist on coming along, so it looks like he's got some nude sidekicks whether he likes it or not.
Very well, seeing as how I don't seem to have a say in the matter.
You don't.
They're not going alone though. Black Heron is after the papyrus as well, and she's dragged Bradford along with her, who's not as into the whole supervillain thing as she is.
Why did we reveal ourselves? We could have landed the plane safely, then captured them.
Embrace your wild side, Bradford. We're supervillains!
No, we are not. Your showboating is going to cost us the papyrus.
As I said back in my Season 1 video, Black Heron is my favorite new original villain of the show, and this whole season has only reinforced that, even establishing that she co-founded Fowl along with Bradford. And pairing the two of them together in this episode is a big part of what makes it so fun.
This is not outlandish supervillainy. This is order, control. With your world-conquering gusto, focused by my top-secret strategic planning, the sky's the limit, and... Fine, I'll add the F.
Villains in fiction usually come in 2 forms. Either they never think they're wrong, imagining in fact that they're the hero of the story, or they just no longer care about right or wrong. Bradford is the former, and Black Heron is the latter. His concept of Fowl is that ruling from the shadows and stealing all the wealth will protect the world... somehow, I don't know. Meanwhile, Heron is just doing evil for evil's sake, and in my opinion, the latter is way more entertaining.
This is what world domination is all about. Embrace your inner villain.
For the last time, I'm an undercover counter agent, not a villain!
Forgot I said that one.
But concerning Della and Donald, the younger versions of them we met in the Christmas episode last season were a lot of fun, so it's great to see them again here too. Young Della acts kind of how you expect, but the real surprise turns out to be young Donald, who is way more excited about adventuring than the grown-up version is. The only downside is that Russi Taylor passed away before she could reprise the role, but fortunately, Christina V proves to be a shockingly good replacement, especially considering half of her dialogue is improvising songs.
Just leave the guitar.
You can't mute me, old man!
But yeah, I don't know if I was expecting an origin story this late in the game, but I'm still glad we got it. And as for the Papyrus of Binding, I really don't want to spoil, just trust me on this. Number 2, Escape from the Impossibin. Scrooge has finally caught on to the fact that Fowl is after him, and has decided to drastically increase the security at the money bin in order to keep his fortune safe. Oh, and his family, too, I guess. In fact, Scrooge has conscripted Louie and Della, his cleverest and most daring relatives, respectively, to try out his new defenses and make sure nobody can get in or out.
And if you make it outside without being driven to the brink of madness, I'll buy lunch.
He really does not expect us to make it.
The only problem is that Scrooge kinda has a boomer moment and forgets the password to shut the defenses off, which means he, Louie, and Della will have to escape the money bin for real.
You're the oldest man in the world! How is your password not 1, 2, 3, 4?
While that's going on, Beakley is back at the mansion teaching the kids self-defense by having Webby get the drop on Huey and Dewey by any means necessary, and everyone starts to question how far they're willing to go to defeat those who would do them harm. Like with Louie's 11, this is another episode that doesn't so much advance the lore as much as it makes use of the lore we have so far. The money bin is an inherently ridiculous idea. A giant structure with so much money stored inside that you have to measure it in cubic feet rather than overall worth. And such a cartoonish place deserves an equally cartoonish security system. We've seen plenty over the years, in the original show, in the movie, and even in the remastered version of the video game. In fact, Scrooge and the others escaping the various traps kind of feels like going through the different levels of a video game, even including a final boss. Some of these segments are almost mind-bending in their creativity. The section with the ultraviolet buzzsaws sets the tone quickly, but probably the best set piece is in the library, where a series of magical tiles alter everyone's field of gravity. The tiles themselves are referred to as Rosa runes, which is a shout out to Don Rosa, the artist and writer who's had the most influence on Scrooge McDuck, aside from Carl Barks himself. The gravity altering aspect is a reference to a famous story he did, A Matter of Some Gravity. But in that story, the magic was due to a curse from Magica to Spell and was only limited to one plane. This episode ups the ante by adding 3 planes of gravity, meaning Scrooge, Louie, and Della have to use precise coordination to escape. And the surreal aspects don't stop there, as Huey and Dewey are turned into absolute nervous wrecks thanks to Webby's sneaking skills. The reboot version of Webby has always had a bit of a violent edge, but shows how terrifyingly effective she can be when she focuses completely on hunting you down. And it slowly makes the boys realize how in over their heads they are.
We know nothing!
If all of this sounds like overkill, even for Scrooge McDuck, that's because it kind of is. For once, Scrooge is actually doubtful that he can defeat Fowl, since Bradford knows everything about him and his defenses. Even Beakley starts taking it too far when Webby finally insists on no longer terrorizing the boys. You know things are bad when Donald has to be the voice of reason.
Mrs. B, this has gone too far!
We have to keep them safe.
But not like this!
The thing is, neither of their fears are unfounded. Bradford does know how to get one up on Scrooge, as he proves by stealing all of the lost treasures at the end of the episode. But defeating the killer robot by weaponizing the money bin itself shows that the Duck family has talents that even Bradford can't surpass. The battle with Fowl is going to be their biggest yet, but they'll win by using Scrooge's oldest motto, working smarter, not harder. And I've taken up enough time already, so let's get to those honorable mentions. The Rumble for Ragnarok. I'm not even a fan of wrestling, and I was on board with this episode immediately. And Launchpad is absolutely priceless when he commentates on the match with Huey.
Greetings, sports fans. Today's spirited match is shaping up to be an enthusiastic...
Are you ready to Ragnarok?
The Trickening. Last year, we had a good Christmas episode, so this year we get a good Halloween episode, featuring fun guest actors as the monsters, and a Launchpad story that really needs to be seen to be believed.
What do you think is going on here?
The Forbidden Fountain of the Foreverglades. We get more adorable romance with Scrooge and Goldie, a nice villain turn for John Ruckerduck, and easily the most gruesome villain death in the entire show. Oh my god, Jesus Christ! The fight for Castle McDuck. This episode is on the list because of Pepper.
You nearly gave us away!
Sorry, Mr. Black. I got a bad case of the sneezies. Funny story. My name's Pepper, but I'm allergic to pepper.
Seriously, Pepper is the best. Protect at all costs. New gods on the block. Hey, we get to see Storkules one more time and see how the presence of Daisy affects his friendship with Donald.
So, fair Daisy, what are your intentions with my Donald?
Has my OTP become an OT3? I'm a grown man talking about a kid's cartoon.
And the number one pick for DuckTales Season 3 is... Let's Get Dangerous.
Yeah, that's right. I put the Darkwing episode at number 1 2 seasons in a row. I'm a basic bitch. You all knew this.
The Duck family is headed to the city of St. Canard to check on a matter creation experiment run by Dr. Taurus Bulba, whose partner, Dr. Waddlemeyer, has mysteriously disappeared. While that's going on, Launchpad and Dewey head off on their own to check on Drake Mallard, who's greatly expanded his arsenal since he decided to become Darkwing Duck for real. Only problem is, there's no crime for him to fight. Remember Allison? Yeah, she's really moved up in the world since last season. She's been elected mayor of St. Canard and has been so good at the job that all crime has been eliminated completely. Fortunately, a case shows up right on DW's doorstep when Dr. Waddlemeyer's granddaughter, Goslin, arrives in need of his help. Turns out Bulba's invention, the Ramrod, doesn't just create matter out of nothing. Rather, it pulls the corresponding item from another neighboring dimension. Goslin suspects her grandfather found this out, and Bulba sent him through the dimensional gateway to a random universe to cover it up. Desperate to find the truth, it's finally time for the masked Mallard to step up to the plate before Bulba's experiment threatens to tear the universe apart.
There is a lot going on in this episode, so I'll try to cover it all the best I can.
First off, the animation. The production team put so much work into this episode that pretty much all of the storyboard artists and animators have shared their work online. And not just with the action scenes. Even scenes of characters just talking have huge amounts of detail put into them. Look at this scene from the beginning of the episode. Dewey and Launchpad are just sitting in a car talking, and there's such a wide range of movement and expression. Even the little details aren't ignored. See these trading cards of the Darkwing Duck villains? The numbers at the top reference the production code of the episode that villain first appeared in. Next, the story. The rough outline involving Darkwing, Goslin, Taurus Bulba, and the Ramrod is a callback to the pilot episode of the original Darkwing show, Darkly Dawns the Duck. Goslin loses her grandfather, Taurus Bulba needs her to get access to a powerful weapon, Darkwing has to stop him, etc., etc. But the story still feels fresh thanks to a few key changes. The original Taurus Bulba is hard to beat. In the original show, he only showed up twice. Once in the pilot, and once more towards the end of the series as a cyborg. Long story. Still, he was easily one of Darkwing's most dangerous foes, and being voiced by Tim Curry certainly didn't hurt.
Bring her down! In a second. Just give me the code.
She never told me any code.
That's a real possibility. But I've always considered myself a gambling man.
This version, voiced by James Monroe Eagleheart, is a bit friendlier but no less ruthless. He's just better at putting on a good face for the public.
So, I'll make my entrance, address the camera. Leaders of the world, I'm here to offer a brand new vision of reality. Our vision! And then we'll show them we mean business by destroying you.
Sorry, what now?
Next up is Goslin, now voiced by Stephanie Beatriz. And this take on the character might come as a surprise, especially if you only know Stephanie from her role on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
No, we get what you are, an adult man who enjoys dress-up.
This version of Goslin is a bit older and a bit more cynical, but there's a reason for that. In the original, her grandfather was killed off screen by Bulba, which she never finds out about. This version knows all too well what really happened to him and is still hurting from that loss, and it's what drives her character throughout the episode.
Without evidence, I can't risk a good person's reputation.
You mean you don't want to risk your own? Some hero.
But still, she and Drake get to bond over the course of the story, and he adopts her all the same at the end. Actually, it's funny, because they didn't re-air the pilot very often when I was a kid, I'd actually forgotten that Goslin was adopted, since they didn't mention it very often afterwards. A small detail maybe, but that just extra bit of melancholy makes the new family she forms with Drake and Launchpad all the sweeter. But what really blows this story wide open is the Ramrod itself.
That sounded dirtier than I intended. Let me explain.
What makes the Ramrod work is a special key called the Salego Circuit. Salego was the villain in a multi-part comic story called Legends of the Chaos God, which was published in Disney Adventures magazine, and it was the first attempt in any medium to bring together all the different Disney Afternoon characters. So if the Ramrod can create portals to alternate dimensions where all fictional universes are real, then that means...
Horace, shut it down. This doohickey is dangerous.
Well then, let's get dangerous.
In the first season, fans were annoyed that Darkwing Duck had been downgraded to a fictional show in the reboot's universe. That was mitigated somewhat by the appearance of Drake Mallard in the second season and his decision to be Darkwing for real, but it still left fans wanting a little bit. But having the Ramrod pull things in from the original Disney Afternoon changes the game completely, and not just for Darkwing. Guess where Bulba imprisons the McDuck family so they don't interfere with his plans?
That ate my ice cream!
Oh my god, I love this. It's like Into the Duckverse!
And believe it or not, this plays into the original creator's intentions. Tad Stones has always said that the version of Launchpad in Darkwing Duck isn't the same one we know from DuckTales. Instead, he'd like to think it was an alternate version of the character who just happened to become DW's sidekick rather than work for Scrooge, and fans were understandably disappointed by that explanation. So in a way, the alternate dimensions fixes that problem without undoing Stones' original work. The DuckTales version is canon, and so is the Darkwing version. In fact, everything is canon. We're just watching the version that decided to bring all of it together, which has the advantage of picking and choosing the best parts. Like with the villains, I love the redesign of Bushroot, making him more sinister and creepy, which is only enhanced by the fact that he doesn't talk.
It's Dr. Reginald Bushroot, a prominent scientist who was accidentally turned into a plant monster. Those vines are part of his root system. If we trigger them, he'll know we're here. Launchpad made me watch a lot of Darkwing Duck.
They unfortunately didn't get all of the original voices for the villains, but Keith Ferguson is talented enough that he manages to serve as an able replacement for both Megavolt and Liquidator.
Look, he's shocked! Get it? 'Cause I electrocuted him.
Make money from home by having your home destroyed! Ask me how!
The big one they did manage to get, though, was voice acting veteran Michael Bell, who at the age of 82 reprises his role as Quackerjack. And if you've ever heard his performance, you'd know he's the only man for the job.
Soon this whole city will be my playground!
Fortunately, though, some things never change. As bad as the situation is, it finally lets Drake show what he's made of and show he's capable of being the hero he's always wanted to be. You can tell how serious he is because he does the one thing Darkwing Duck would never do. Ask Gizmo Duck for help.
Whoa, I had no idea things were that serious.
And before you think DW is taking this whole thing over, don't worry. This is still very much a DuckTales story, because this is where Scrooge and the nephews finally discover that Bradford is working for Fowl, setting up the whole rest of the season.
Our reality just got a lot more dangerous.
But, yeah, I have no problem making this my number one pick for the season, because it exemplifies everything I've loved about the DuckTales reboot.
The mission statement of DuckTales is solving mysteries and rewriting history. But rewriting everything would have been too easy. This show didn't rewrite the DuckTales canon. It added to it. It added to the rich history of the original show, the Disney Afternoon, and the original comics by Carl Barks and Don Rosa. They took this rich history of characters, settings, and stories and brought them all together under one banner. The team knew they had something special with this episode because it's the only one aside from the pilot you can watch for free on Disney's YouTube page. There's even tons of stuff I didn't mention, like the cameo from Bonkers or from the Floppy Dogs. Sheesh, that's a deep cut even by my standards. And yeah, I'm sad that the show is over, but I can't be too down about it considering all of the care and work that went into every single episode. This show was made by an incredibly dedicated group of writers and animators who had a clear passion for the source material. This was made by fans for fans, and all of that hard work is paid off. I was 6 years old when I first started watching the original DuckTales, and this show didn't just give me the same old thing I knew before. It gave me something completely fresh, something that expanded on the stories I loved, rather than just rotely copying them like lesser reboots have done.
Well, that's it. The story is over. But the adventure? That never ends. Thanks for watching.